Young. Welcome to your 12-minute HR lesson. If you've listened to a couple of these, you must be thinking to yourself, man, this guy loves movies. As The Lonely Island said to Michael Bolton, you must be a major cinephile. But I don't really, no more than anybody else. There's two reasons why I'm always talking about movies, why I'm always talking about stories and music, because I'm looking for things that we share in common. I'm looking for something that is a pretty good chance you know of, or it's not miles off, or I can reasonably say, hey, look, this is interesting, go and listen to this. I want to start from a position of you kind of having the base knowledge on something, in which I say, hey, look, there's a really interesting thing just below the surface. And insight into that helps us see insight over here. So that's a little bit of behind the curtain stuff. That's the behind the scenes tour of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and why I keep talking about these movies. Anyway, today, I'm going to keep talking about movies. I'm going to talk about a lot of movies, but I'm not specifically talking about one movie. I'm going to talk about a movie trope, and then I'm going to talk about a movie trope that subverts that movie trope. So let's go. So I'm going to make a confession. I'm an overthinker. This may not surprise you. This certainly doesn't surprise a lot of people that I know. It's a character flaw. What am I going to say? So when I watch movies and TV and popular and general media, I'm always interested in the how and the why they do this and why this works. What are the strings? What's the code behind the image that means that this works? So one of the things I'm always interested in is tropes. What is a trope? How does it work? Why is it a good thing? Why it's limited? But also, why do we see the same thing again and again? I'm not going to go into that specifically, but I'm going to talk about one trope, and that is the found family trope. This is something you see in all sorts of movies. There's lots of examples of this. There's The Fast and the Furious, Guardians of the Galaxy, Toy Story, Goonies, Lord of the Rings, Shrek, and perhaps the most extreme, X-Men. The idea is in all of these movies, here we have a bunch of people who don't fit in, who all come together and form a family. They find a family with each other. And through that connection and those bonds, they find their place in the world and they find themselves. Once you start to see that trope, you see it everywhere. It's really interesting. Whenever we are talking about the bonds between a group of people, yes, there's action scenes, but really what we're talking about is the bonds. That's really interesting. But every time we have a trope, we also have an opportunity to subvert the trope. We also have writers and directors who go, okay, well, that's the trope. Let's subvert that. Take the concept of a found family that everybody will get subconsciously, and let's make a horror and a thriller out of that. Let's take situations in which people think that they are finding a family, but in fact, the new person is a threat or the family is a threat to them. There's lots of examples here. There is The Walking Dead, there is Fight Club, there is Get Out, and a whole long list of thrillers who subvert the found family. We have these sort of two parallel types of stories that we can see. One in which people can find their people can find their group, they can find where they fit in because they didn't fit in elsewhere. Or we have the situation of someone who it looks like they're going to fit in actually turn up and they're the snake in the grass. They are the double agent. They are the poison that turns everything septic. So this is a more complex idea. So I'm going to give you some examples of this. In fact, I can give you a whole film franchise that this is actually what they're doing here. The whole film franchise works along those lines. And that is the movie series Aliens. This is pretty much every alien movie. In those scenarios, the alien is not really the villain. The alien is the force of nature. It's a wild animal or sets of animals who, yes, they are the threat, and they are this extremely violent, dangerous threat that forces this group of people to come together as a found family to defend themselves. But in pretty much every one of those movies, there is a secret villain within that group. In the first movie, it was the android. In the second movie, it was Paul Ritter's character, who was a corporate agent. In the other movies from Prometheus and Covenant, it is Michael Fassbender's character, the android. The aliens are scary. The aliens are dangerous, but they are no different from a storm outside your house, a blizzard that you are all stuck within. The real villain of those movies is the traitor in the midst. And that's the interesting idea. If there's one thing I don't like in HR, it's nebulous words. It's vague truisms. And perhaps one of the vaguest, nebulous, broadest, more unhelpful than helpful word that we tend to come across is fit. Because it's a little bit of a placeholder. It means many things to many people, and as soon as a word has two meanings, we immediately get into the trouble of ambiguous language. And the word fit falls into that category. So instead of the word fit, I'm going to talk about fitting in. Now we get into this interesting question of someone fitting in. And I'm not going to talk about new hires, but I am going to talk about the question here of moving problems. Are we moving people or are we moving problems? Because that's what we want to talk about today. And I started off with those two broad analogies of those two stories. Are we finding someone, their family and their new member? Or are we introducing a villain, a poison, a corrupter, someone who is going to make things worse? This is something you will find yourself thinking about every so often, a couple of times a year. You've got someone, they're not working out in their job. The question is, perhaps they could go over there and work with that team. And you have to ask yourself, or the manager should be asking, are we just moving a problem? So I can't tell you whether or not it's going to work out. I can't guarantee it. There is no magic formula. What I can do is point you in the right direction of looking to see what the problems are, what the causes are, and whether or not they're likely to give you some sort of insight as to which way this is going to go. Because the short answer is you'll never know. You can't run a trial. You can't do a control. You can't have two parallel situations where you both move them and not. Hence, we'll never know whether it was the right decision or the wrong decision. But to me, these are some of the core predictors, and that is, what are the root causes of the problem? Here's the type of thing that I would expect to see if I think that the move is going to be successful. The reality is sometimes the root cause of the problem is not the person, but it's the fit. It's how well they fit into various aspects. It could be the team. It could be they're just not the right type of people. It could be that they are too similar to someone else. It could be that they're too different to someone else. It could be that they just can't build those connections and those harmonies within that team, or there is something about them that just rubs people up the wrong way, or the other way around, or there is that difficult person within the team that everybody else has learnt to live with, but the new person is struggling with. And that sometimes happens. There is friction between the person and the people around them, and it's not just that person's fault. Alternatively, it could be the role. It could be the way the role is structured. It could be inflexibility. It could be that the role hasn't changed, but maybe they've changed. Maybe they've gotten older. Maybe they're not as young as they used to be. And what they could easily do years ago is now more of a struggle. When I was working in factories, a big thing I kept talking to people about is to say, hey, look, this heavy labor job that you could do in your 20s, you're now in your 40s. Are you sure you want to be doing that? Because the chances of you making it through to 65 fully fit and not worn out from this job is pretty low. Do you want to think about moving now before your body gives up on you? So sometimes it happens that way. Sometimes it's the work. Sometimes it's the position. The heart of the matter is it them, or is it the interaction between them and the job and the people and the work. Let's take a scenario in which we are likely to be moving a problem. If, practically speaking, the root cause is the person, it's their expectations, it's their ideas, it's their sense of worth. It's nothing really between them and someone else. It's just who they are isn't working. They're overqualified, they're underqualified. They've got high expectations, they've got the wrong expectations. They've got too many things outside of work. Then that's a scenario in which I'm going to say those root causes are likely to transfer to someone else. I would also suggest avoiding the scenario where we'll move them from manager A to manager B because manager B, they're really good, they're much better, they can handle that person. You could do that if you're really, really short on labour. If there's no unemployed people in the region and you kind of have to make do with what you've got, then absolutely, sometimes we have to do that. But generally speaking, if people can't do the job for a B- manager, then we shouldn't move them to an A+ manager to get them to do what they ought to be doing. Have you read my articles? You don't have to. They're a little bit different for this. They're less tangent, less discussion of movie, less deep dives into deep complex idea about movie tropes and subversion and so on and so forth. They're a little bit more, this is what to do, this is how to do them, this is things you need to think about, a little bit more focused, a little bit more structured than this. I tend to not just do the same thing in different media. You can find them all at pragmatichrm.nz. There's lots of articles there. Feel free to check out our courses. Feel free to look at our service that we can also offer. So if you're interested in anything that we might have to offer, check us out at pragmatichrm.nz. Thank you.